Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a Londoner, but I spent most of my lockdown quarantining outside of the city. So I thought I would show you some of the scenes of when I've come back to London now and they're starting to lift some of the quarantine restrictions. Please do keep in mind that obviously you aren't going to see every single part of each situation I'm going to show you. I did follow government guidelines and my safety is just as important as everybody else's. Just keep that in mind when you watch this. So the first person that I was able to socially distance meet up with when I returned to London was my friend Taylor. And you might recognize Taylor. Last summer, we created a video for you where we showed you some of London's quirkiest ice creams. We tried all of them and rated them. She's also a travel blogger, an Instagrammer, and she's the author of the book, The Rainbow Atlas, which is coming out soon, and she's one of my best friends. At this point, we were allowed to meet up with people out in outdoor spaces, and as long as you socially distance, and Taylor and I were able to walk to be able to meet each other in a public park. We had a lovely little picnic and just caught up and relaxed in the sun. The weather was beautiful, but I also asked her how her lockdown experience has been because she's been in London the whole time.
So how's it been in quarantine in London?
At the beginning, it was really boring. Then the weather got amazing, so I basically lived out here on Clapham Common for most of my time. Did a lot of reading, a lot of macrameing.
Cute.
Made a lot of poles for my plants out here on the common with like twine. Gotten a lot of weird looks. But yeah, spending time outside has been like the best cure to the boredom, I guess.
In a few days, non-essential shops are going to open, so what's the first shop that you're going to go to?
I'd really like to go to IKEA to get more pots for my plants because
IKEA's
they're
already
really
open.
cheap. I know that it is, but I haven't been on public transportation yet.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just like a little nervous about getting on public transportation. I feel like once I'm on it, it'll be fine. But like I haven't like put the mask on yet and like gone on it, and I'm a little nervous about like the mask aspect of everything.
I know, I haven't worn a mask yet either.
Yeah.
I haven't been on it. When hospitality starts to open up, what's your first place that you want to go?
I just want to go on a real date with my boyfriend.
Oh, cute.
I just want to like sit in a restaurant and not have the TV on while we're eating and just like not be at home having a meal.
Is there a restaurant you have in mind?
Nothing in particular. I don't know what will open over here really because nothing really has that much outside seating. So I don't know how they'll do it.
Is it going to be that they're going to be opening it with like mostly the places that have outside space?
I feel like that's what they've done everywhere else in the world. Like I know in Paris, like the terraces are open. I would love to go to the beer garden that's in Brixton. What's it called? The Duke of Edinburgh?
Duke of Wales. Prince of Wales.
Duke of Edinburgh. I'd love to go to that one because that one's massive, so they could definitely socially distance in there. Yeah. So I feel like that would be good. I hope that they reopen number 32. Everything's really up in the air right now, so it's a little confusing to know what will be open. But I have to say, like, there's so much stuff already open on Clapham High Street. A lot of the restaurants are already doing like takeaway drinks and food. So in about 4 hours, the Common will be turned into a festival, basically.
What's it been like quarantining in a country that's not where your family is?
If I was by myself, I would have gone crazy by now, but I've been quarantining with my boyfriend, who is also not working, so it's been a little bit easier in that sense, that I don't feel as lonely as I think I would have. The only thing that I keep wondering is when am I going to be able to see my family? I was meant to be in France a few weeks ago with my mom, and the next time I see my mom, it'll be over a year since I last saw her, and that's the longest I've ever gone without seeing her.
Any signing off that you want to do?
Stay safe, stay alert.
What's the last one?
I don't know. Stay alert.
Stay alert, everybody.
Then a few days later, I planned to meet up with Karolina. And if you watch my video about how my YouTube channel became a business, you'll see that Karolina, she actually works for me. She's my head of content and brand partnerships, but she also happens to be one of my best friends as well. The problem is that Karolina lives on like totally the opposite end of London from where I live. So I had to look at where we could meet that's in the middle, because we were also trying to not use public transportation to be able to see each other, because they were asking for people to avoid it as much as possible. And when I looked, I saw that Bermondsey was actually a really good in-between for both of us to be able to cycle to from where we live. And I had seen on Instagram that FLEA was going to be reopening the weekend that Karolina and I wanted to meet up. You might recognize FLEA from a couple of our videos, but specifically it's in the one about hidden gems to visit when you come to visit London. Essentially, it's an outdoor flea market where there are vendors that sell homemade things, vintage things, reworked items, and the vendors are always so nice, and obviously they hadn't been able to sell anything in person for a couple of months, so we wanted to go and support them and wanted to take some footage. So I kind of combined everything so that I could see Karolina and we could also go to FLEA and speak to some people and maybe do some shopping. Bermondsey is still quite far from where I live. I definitely couldn't walk, so I figured that I needed to cycle. I do have a bike. The problem is that it was like super rusty and wasn't really in the best working condition, but I was able to take Coca-Cola and dip aluminum foil into the Coke and rub it on the chain and other parts of the bike that were rusty, and I got it into like good enough working condition to be able to cycle. Okay, so then on the day, I set off for a 40-minute cycle to get to Bermondsey, and I wanted to film. I had my camera in the basket of the bike, but you know, after cycling for about 3 minutes, I realized it was going to be way too stressful to try to film and cycle at the same time. Aggressive drivers, aggressive bikers. I just needed to be able to pay attention and make sure that I was like fully alert even when I was stopped in traffic. So I got to Bermondsey, I met up with Karolina, and I'm so glad we went to FLEA because it was just really nice to see how they set everything up. I talked to some of the vendors and they said actually the day before and that day they had a lot of people that were coming, so they have a really nice amount of footfall. They were all like very happy to just be back at it and selling and making some money, obviously. Then Karolina and I just decided to walk around Bermondsey a bit because it was just such a lovely day. We came across this little window that was selling cocktails, so we got a couple of margaritas. Then we ordered Franco Manca pizzas, which I had been craving for so long. I just wanted like really good Italian style pizza, and Franco Manca in the area was doing takeaway, so we ordered the takeaway online, and then we found a spot in a park that we could both sit socially distanced and just continue our catch up and have some pizza and enjoy our time together because we hadn't seen each other for months.
So what's it been like in lockdown in London?
It's been interesting. I feel like the area that I live in East London has been probably more relaxed than central London. You could still see people and some cafes opening, so getting your morning coffee, comparing to maybe central London where everything was shut and you probably wouldn't even see anybody.
When they open up the restaurants and bars, where's the first place that you're gonna go to?
I don't think that I would be straight away comfortable going to the restaurant or bar, but I would definitely be going to places that have outdoor seating or outdoor space, or even grabbing like a takeaway and going to the park.
But are there any specific places that you're like craving and really want to go to, or not really?
Yes, I really miss brunching. I miss going to my favorite brunch spots and just able to go to places without needing to queue or wait for a long time, pick up anything I want in the shop. Yeah, and drink in a pub. Definitely miss having a drink in a pub with my friends, seeing my friends, and just been able to enjoy time without any restrictions.
So at this point, I was like, okay, you know, even though we're not fully back to normal, we can still see people, we can still enjoy ourselves together without it being too much of a problem. And it just made me realize, okay, even though it's probably still gonna be a few more months before we can fully get back to where we were, if we even can, this is a doable, the new norm. That phrase is just the worst, but this is doable. There are much worse things. And thinking back 2.5 months before that where we weren't allowed to even leave the house to see anybody. It was a nice little revelation, I guess. And then I wanted to show you my first tube journey since lockdown. And as I mentioned, the government has asked that people only use the tube when they don't have any other option. It's not for just essential travel, but they said if you can walk, if you can cycle, if you have your own car and can drive, to try to do that so that we can keep the people who do have to take the tube to go to work and things like that. We can try to keep them safe, and also all of the workers who work for the Transport for London. On this occasion, I did have to get somewhere pretty quickly. It was a matter of urgency, and it was just way too far for me to cycle, and I was potentially going to be cycling back home at night. It was going to be like a 20-mile cycle. I don't think my bike would have lasted, and I definitely wouldn't have either, so I was prepared to take the necessary cautions to be able to take the tube. Okay, so a couple of the things that I did was I avoided rush hour, because that's what the government's asked for, and also you have to wear a face mask when you're on public transportation unless you have a health condition that means that you can't. I was a bit worried before I took the tube, not because of taking the actual tube or anything like that, but just because I had been told by a couple of friends who had to take the tube already that because it's been so warm, it's very difficult to breathe because most of the tube lines don't have air conditioning on them. So I was worried that I was going to find it very difficult to breathe with the face mask on. But there weren't that many people on the tube at all. And when I was on the car that didn't have aircon, it wasn't like a super hot day. So it actually, once I sat down with my face mask on and just did a few deep breaths, it felt fine to breathe, even though it was a little bit warm, but it wasn't like sweltering. And then the second half of my ride was on a tube that had aircon, so that was completely fine. And it wasn't very busy. Most people had face masks on, and hopefully the people who didn't, it was because they have a health condition, but we'll never know. So yeah, it actually went totally fine. If I need to do it again, I'm still avoiding public transport as much as possible to keep everybody else safe. But when I have to do it again, I think it will be totally fine. Unless it's a much hotter day, that might be a bit of a different story. Okay, so as I'm filming this, the government had just released that in England, from the 4th of July, restaurants and pubs and a few other businesses will be allowed to reopen with major social distancing guidelines happening. So I'm thinking that I should film my experiences of going into some restaurants and pubs as things open back up. I think it's gonna be really crazy busy. If that's a video that you think would be interesting, let me know in the comments and I'll make sure that I film that and show you guys what's going on as all these lockdown restrictions are lifting. I know a lot of you have had your trips to London canceled, and that is a bummer, but you'll get here eventually. But do let me know in the comments when you're thinking you might be planning for your trip to London, whether it's at the end of the year or maybe not till 2021 or beyond. Both, I understand how everybody's feeling a bit anxious about international travel. I totally get that. And if you are still planning your trip to London for whatever point in time, I do have other videos, obviously lots of other videos for you to watch to make sure you plan the best trip ever, which you can watch some of them by clicking the box that's popping up below me.